They said the monstrous alien beast had to be sacrificed, but the human gently fed and pet it. The air inside the containment wing tasted like copper and ozone. The recycled atmosphere thick enough that Mira could feel it coating her throat with each breath. Her boots struck the metal grating in measured rhythm as she followed the security escort deeper into the research facility, tactical gear settling against her body with familiar weight. 3 weeks of travel through jump space to reach Theros 7, and her assignment turned out to be a pre-execution formality, behavioral assessment of a creature already condemned. The escort, a young corporal whose name patch read Jensen, kept his rifle trained on the corridor ahead, movements betraying the kind of tension that came from proximity to something that had killed his squad mates. He hadn't spoken since they entered the lower levels. "How many personnel have direct contact with the specimen?" Mira asked, her voice steady despite the adrenaline beginning to sharpen her senses. "Just you, ma'am. Colonel's orders. Feed slot only, twice daily. Nothing goes in or out of that cell without armed supervision." The corridor terminated at a reinforced door bearing biohazard warnings and a damage assessment placard that listed casualties in clinical shorthand. 3 soldiers dead, 5 injured. Cause of engagement, territorial defense. Mira studied the details, cataloging the violence, searching for patterns in the wounds described. Defensive injuries, protective aggression, not predation. Jensen's hand hovered over the door controls. "Ready when you are." She nodded once, and the door split open with a hiss of pressure equalization. The containment chamber beyond was 20 meters across, divided by floor-to-ceiling bars reinforced with electromagnetic dampening fields that hummed just below audible range. Portable floodlights cast harsh shadows across concrete walls, scarred with claw marks, and the air carried the mineral scent of alien biology mixed with antiseptic. In the far corner, behind the bars, something massive shifted in the darkness. Mira stepped forward, letting her eyes adjust. The corporal remained at the door, weapon ready, but she barely registered his presence. Her focus narrowed to the shape resolving in the shadows, emerald scales catching light like polished jade, a powerful frame held unnaturally still by chains anchored into the reinforced floor. The creature's head lifted as she approached, and amber eyes locked onto hers with such precise focus that her breath caught. Intelligence burned in that gaze, not animal awareness, not simple cognition, understanding. She moved closer to the bars, ignoring Jensen's sharp intake of breath behind her. The Korvathi, she'd seen images in the mission briefing, but nothing prepared her for the physical reality, stood over 7 feet tall, even in its restrained position. Its body suggested both reptilian grace and devastating strength, emerald scales overlapping in patterns that seemed to shift subtly with each breath. The head was distinctly draconic, elongated snout, pronounced features, swept-back crests framing a skull that conveyed unexpected complexity. But those eyes held her attention. They tracked her movements with focused intensity, studying her as thoroughly as she studied it. "You're not a monster," she said quietly, not expecting response, simply needing to speak the truth aloud. The Korvathi's head tilted fractionally, a deliberate gesture, questioning. Behind her, Jensen shifted his weight. "Dr. Kendall, Colonel Varro expects your preliminary assessment by—" "Tell the Colonel I'll need more time." She didn't turn away from those amber eyes. "This creature requires extended observation before I can provide anything meaningful." "Ma'am, the termination schedule—" "We'll wait." She finally glanced back, letting steel enter her tone, unless the Colonel wants his behavioral assessment based on 20 seconds of visual contact. Jensen hesitated, then spoke into his comm unit, voice low. A moment later, he straightened. "Colonel says you have 48 hours. I'll be posted outside." The door sealed behind him, and silence settled over the chamber. Mira waited, counting her own heartbeats, giving the Korvathi time to adjust to her solitary presence. When she moved again, she approached the control panel mounted beside the bars and pulled up the facility logs on the transparent display. Capture date 6 days prior. Location, Sacred Ground designation per Indigenous survey. A detail someone had tried to redact but failed to encrypt properly. Initial engagement. Human patrol entered restricted zone. Korvathi responded with force. Casualties occurred during extraction. not initial contact. Her fingers flew across the interface, pulling up medical scans. The Korvathi bore multiple injuries consistent with tranquilizer rounds and energy weapons. Defensive wounds. It had been protecting something. A low sound drew her attention back to the cell. The Korvathi had shifted position, chains rattling as it adjusted its weight. One foreleg, arm, she corrected herself, noting the dexterous quality of those clawed digits, bore a poorly healed wound where scales had been torn away, revealing darker tissue beneath. The facility hadn't bothered with proper medical treatment. Why heal something scheduled for execution? She accessed the feed slot controls, hesitating only briefly before overriding the automated schedule. The mechanism clicked open, and she retrieved her field kit from the tactical pack at her hip. Inside, standard medical supplies, sterilization units, tissue regeneration matrix designed for xenobiological applications. She'd packed it out of habit, never expecting to use it here. "I'm going to help you," she said, laying out supplies on the narrow shelf beside the slot. "But I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" The Korvathi remained motionless except for those amber eyes which followed her every movement with unnerving focus. Then, slowly, deliberately, it extended the injured limb toward the bars. Mira's pulse quickened, not from fear, from recognition. That was consent, choice. The creature understood her intent and was offering cooperation. She worked quickly but carefully, threading medical instruments through the slot to reach the wound. The Korvathi held perfectly still as she cleaned the damaged scales, applied regeneration matrix, and sealed the injury with biocompatible adhesive. Its breathing remained steady throughout the process, controlled in a way that suggested conscious regulation rather than instinct. When she finished, the creature drew its arm back and examined her work with what could only be described as curiosity. Then it looked at her again, and something passed between them. A moment of connection that transcended species, language, the bars separating them. "What are you?" she whispered, but she already knew the answer wasn't in any database. Over the following hours, Mira returned repeatedly to the containment chamber, each visit extending longer than the last. She brought food supplements designed for reptilian biology and water treated to match Theros 7's mineral profile. The Korvathi accepted both, its movements becoming less guarded, more responsive. She narrated her actions, maintaining steady commentary even without verbal response, and found herself sharing observations about the facility, carefully neutral complaints about military procedure, fragments of her own history in xenobiology. The Korvathi listened. She felt certain of it. Those amber eyes tracked not just her physical presence, but her tone, her gestures, the subtle shifts in her emotional state. When she spoke about losing her previous research position over ethical disagreements with corporate exploitation of indigenous species, the creature's scales seemed to shift in color, barely perceptible, but present, a physiological response to her words. On the second day, as she cleaned another of its wounds by the dim glow of portable lighting, she let her hand rest against the bars. The Korvathi observed this gesture for a long moment, then carefully, deliberately, reached out to mirror her position. Scale met metal separated by millimeters, and Mira felt heat radiating from that enormous hand. "I know you understand me," she said softly. "I don't know how much or what you think of us, but I promise you, I'm going to find a way to get you out of here." The Korvathi's eyes held hers, and for reasons she couldn't articulate, Mira believed it understood every word. Colonel David Varro arrived on the third morning with the kind of presence that made rooms feel smaller. Mira looked up from her data slate as he entered her temporary quarters, his steel-gray hair catching the overhead lights, cold blue eyes assessing her with the same clinical detachment she'd seen him apply to equipment manifests. "Your 48 hours expired 6 hours ago, Dr. Kendall. I need your assessment." She set down the slate carefully, meeting his gaze without flinching. "The specimen demonstrates complex cognitive function well beyond initial classification. I'm recommending extended study rather than termination." Extended study. Varro's tone carried no inflection. "The creature killed 3 of my soldiers. The creature was defending territory your patrol violated. According to your own logs, they entered a sacred ground designation." Indigenous superstition isn't relevant to security protocols. He moved to her desk, scanning the reports displayed there. You've spent 18 hours in direct proximity to a hostile xenomorph. That's not assessment, Doctor. That's attachment. That's science, Colonel. Real xenobiology requires observation, not execution. His jaw tightened fractionally, the only sign her words landed. You have 24 hours to compile your findings. After that, the specimen is scheduled for vivisection. We need neural tissue samples to understand how these creatures coordinate pack behavior. The word vivisection hit like a physical blow, but Mira kept her expression neutral. You'll kill it for tissue samples? We'll extract maximum intelligence value from a hostile resource. That's my mandate. He turned toward the door, then paused. One more thing, Doctor. Your security clearance doesn't extend to facility databases. Stay in authorized areas or I'll have you confined to quarters. The door sealed behind him, and Mira sat motionless, pulse hammering in her ears. 24 hours. She pulled up her personal logs, hands shaking slightly, as she compiled observation notes that painted the Korvathi as nothing more than a dangerous animal with learned responses. Words that meant survival for the creature in that cell, even if they tasted like betrayal on her tongue. She found Dr. Hassan Okoye in the research lab that evening, his wire-rimmed glasses reflecting the glow of tissue samples suspended in analysis fields. The older scientist looked up as she entered, his kind eyes crinkling with concern. Mira, I heard about your extended observation period. She glanced at the security cameras mounted in the corners, then moved closer, keeping her voice low. Hassan, something's wrong here. The official story about that Korvathi doesn't match the evidence. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I've had similar concerns. The creatures we've processed over the past months, the tissue samples show neural complexity that shouldn't exist in non-sentient species. He pulled up a display, highlighting scan results. Synaptic density comparable to human standards, language centers, abstract reasoning capacity. But Varro classified all findings as classified military intelligence. How many have they captured? At least 15 that I know of. Most were terminated before analysis. His expression grew heavy. The initial encounter your specimen was involved in? The soldiers weren't on patrol. They were raiding nesting grounds. Mira's breath stopped. They took juveniles? I don't know what happened to them, but 3 days later, your specimen attacked a military convoy. Not random aggression, Mira. Targeted rescue attempt. The pieces aligned with terrible clarity. Sethran, she'd started thinking of him with a name, though she didn't know where it came from, hadn't been defending territory. He'd been trying to save his people. That night, she returned to containment with stolen medical supplies and a plan half-formed from desperation. The guard posted outside, a different corporal, older and clearly uninterested in conversation, barely acknowledged her presence. She entered the chamber to find Sethran waiting, those amber eyes tracking her immediately. We don't have much time, she said, moving to the bars. They're going to kill you tomorrow. Cut you open while you're still alive to study your brain. His scales rippled, color shifting toward deeper green. Distress, she realized. He understood. I'm going to get you out of here. Tonight, but I need you to trust me completely. She explained the plan in whispered fragments. Sedatives that would mimic death, falsified medical readings, a body bag smuggled to the waste disposal area, where the facility's automated systems would transport it outside the perimeter. It was desperate and full of holes, but it was all she had. Sethran remained motionless throughout her explanation, those intelligent eyes never leaving her face. When she finished, he moved toward the bars, not quickly but with purpose, and extended both arms through the feed slot. Not aggression, surrender, absolute trust placed in her hands. Mira's throat tightened as she prepared the injections. I'm sorry I can't do more. I'm sorry they hurt you. I'm sorry we came to your world and... His clawed hand moved carefully and touched her wrist. The contact sent heat up her arm, and she froze, meeting his gaze. In that moment, something passed between them that had no name in either of their languages. Acknowledgement, gratitude, connection that transcended the bars separating them. She administered the sedatives in carefully calculated doses, watching his vital signs on her medical scanner as his breathing slowed, his massive frame settling toward the floor with controlled descent. Even unconscious, he managed to position himself away from the chains to make her work easier. The power failure hit 40 minutes later. Emergency lighting flared red as the facility's main grid collapsed, and Mira's comm unit erupted with overlapping voices, secondary systems failing, containment protocols compromised, security breach in multiple sectors. She grabbed her scanner, checking Sethron's readings, but they remained stable. He was still under sedation. Then the backup systems died and the bars separating them went dark. Mira pulled her flashlight from her tactical belt, the beam cutting through absolute darkness. Sethron lay unmoving on the far side of the cell, and she made a decision born from training and instinct. She accessed the manual release, her security override still functional on the mechanical systems, and the bars slid open with a grinding sound that seemed deafening in the silence. She crossed to him, kneeling beside his massive form, and began checking his injuries by flashlight. The facility's collapse meant her extraction plan was worthless, but it also meant opportunity. In chaos, a missing prisoner might go unnoticed long enough to reach the wilderness beyond the perimeter. Her hands moved over his scales, checking for new wounds, ensuring the sedatives hadn't caused complications. His breathing remained steady, and heat radiated from his body in waves that made the cold facility air seem distant. She found herself cataloging details she'd never seen so closely. The intricate patterns of his scales, the powerful musculature beneath, the way his features held both alien beauty and fierce grace. "I don't know what you are," she whispered, more to herself than him, "but I know you're not a monster, and I know I can't let them kill you." Her hand rested against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his dual hearts, and something in her own chest tightened with emotion she couldn't name. Protectiveness. Connection. The beginning of something that frightened her more than the darkness surrounding them. When his eyes opened, amber catching her flashlight beam, she didn't pull away. His gaze held hers with an intensity that spoke of full consciousness, and she realized the sedatives had worn off faster than predicted, or he'd metabolized them with deliberate control. He could have escaped the moment the bars opened. Instead, he'd waited for her. "You're awake," she breathed. He moved slowly, carefully, rising to a sitting position that still towered over her kneeling form. His hand lifted, clawed fingers trembling slightly, and touched her face with impossible gentleness. The contact sent electricity through her nervous system, and she heard her own breath catch. Around them, the facility remained dark and chaotic, alarms distant but growing closer. They had minutes, perhaps less, before security reached this sector. But in that moment, Mira couldn't move, couldn't break the connection of his touch against her skin, couldn't deny the truth that terrified her. She cared about this creature, this person, in ways that defied every boundary she'd been taught to maintain. Sethron withdrew his hand from her face as voices echoed down the corridor, and Mira forced herself to move, to think tactically despite the way her skin still burned where he'd touched her. She grabbed his arm, scaled muscles solid beneath her grip, and pulled him toward the maintenance access panel she'd noticed during her earlier visits. This way, the tunnels connect to the lower research levels. He followed without resistance, moving with fluid grace despite his size, and she realized he was allowing her to lead, trusting her judgment in an environment he didn't know. They slipped through the access panel seconds before emergency lighting flickered back to life in the main chamber, casting everything in blood-red illumination. The maintenance tunnel forced them into close proximity, Mira's shoulder brushing against Sethron's scaled arm as they navigated the narrow passage. Her flashlight beam revealed pipes and conduits, the mechanical infrastructure of the facility laid bare. Behind them, she heard the containment chamber door opening, voices shouting, the realization of his escape spreading like contagion. They reached a junction point where the tunnel opened into a service corridor, and Mira pulled up the facility schematic on her data slate, hands steadier now that she had a concrete problem to solve. The lower research levels, Hassan had mentioned them. If the military was holding other Korvathi there, maybe she could... A hand closed around her wrist and she looked up to find Sethran watching her with an expression she couldn't read. He made a sound low and resonant that vibrated through her bones. Not threatening, questioning. "I'm trying to find where they're keeping your people," she said. "Hassan told me there were others. If we can free them before—" His grip tightened fractionally, and he shook his head in a gesture so human it startled her. Then he did something she didn't expect. He stepped back, putting distance between them, and his body began to shift. Mira watched in frozen silence as his form rippled, scales sliding over restructuring bone and muscle, his massive frame compacting and reshaping itself. The transformation took less than 30 seconds, and when it finished, a different being stood before her. Still Korvathi, still unmistakably him, those same amber eyes, that same emerald coloration, but compressed into a humanoid configuration that stood just under 7 feet tall. His features remained reptilian but streamlined, more elegant, and his body suggested both strength and precision in proportions that her mind recognized as deliberately bipedal. He wore no clothing, his scaled skin serving that function naturally, and when he spoke, his voice carried a resonant quality that made her chest tight. Mira, her name in his mouth, perfectly pronounced, understanding implicit in every syllable. She stepped back, hand moving instinctively toward the weapon at her hip before she consciously registered the motion. "You can talk." "Yes, you've always been able to talk." "Yes." The simple confirmation hit harder than elaborate explanation would have. Every moment in that cell, every word she'd spoken believing he couldn't respond, every touch and promise made to a creature she'd thought was trapped behind the barrier of language, all of it recontextualized in an instant. "You let me think you were an animal." Her voice came out flat, controlled, the tone she used when emotions threatened to overwhelm tactical thinking. "I let you think I couldn't answer," he corrected, taking a careful step toward her. "I never pretended to be mindless." That's semantic manipulation. That's survival. His expression shifted, subtle movements of scaled features conveying regret. "My people have hidden our true nature from humanity since your first ships arrived. We learned early that you exploit sentience when you find it profitable and destroy it when you find it threatening." Mira's mind raced through implications, connecting pieces she'd been too close to see. The territorial disputes that always ended in Korvathi deaths, the sacred grounds that mining operations routinely violated, the specimens Hassan had processed, people, not animals, subjected to vivisection while fully aware. "How many of you have we killed?" "Hundreds, over 15 years. He moved closer, and she held her ground, though every instinct screamed to maintain distance. "My people chose invisibility over war. We speak your language, understand your technology, walk among you in this form, and you never know. It's the only advantage we have." "You've been spying on us." "We've been surviving you." The distinction felt important, but her emotions were a storm she couldn't navigate. Anger, betrayal, understanding, guilt. They collided in her chest, making it hard to breathe. Everything between us was a lie. "No." The word carried weight, and he closed the remaining distance between them, though he didn't touch her. "I was captured trying to free juveniles from a transport. Your military separated them from their parents, took them for study. I tracked them here, and your soldiers shot me during extraction. When I woke in that cell, I was too injured to hold this form. Shifting requires energy, healing, stability. I was trapped in my primal shape, and then you arrived." He paused, and something in his amber eyes made her throat constrict. "You treated me like I mattered, not as a specimen or a resource, but as something worthy of compassion. I'd observed humans for years, Mira. I knew your capacity for cruelty, for destruction, for seeing entire species as obstacles to overcome. But I didn't know you could look at something alien and choose kindness. So you used that. You manipulated my empathy to ensure your survival." At first, he didn't deny it, and somehow that honesty hurt worse than a lie would have. "But then you came back, again and again. You spoke to me about your life, your losses, your reasons for caring about creatures others dismissed. You risked your career to heal my wounds. You promised to free me, knowing it could cost you everything." His hand lifted, hovering near her face but not making contact. The manipulation ended the moment I realized I wanted to answer you, that your voice mattered more than my mission, that the thought of you facing consequences for helping me made my chest hurt in ways I don't have words for in either of my languages. Mira stared at him, this stranger wearing a familiar gaze, and felt something crack in her carefully maintained walls. I don't know how to process this. I know. I don't know if I can trust anything I felt in that cell. I know that too. But you stayed. The words came out raw. When the power failed, you could have escaped. Instead, you waited for me. I'll always wait for you, simple, absolute, terrifying in its certainty. A proximity alarm shrieked through the corridor, and Mira's training overrode her emotional paralysis. She grabbed his arm, the humanoid configuration still warm beneath her grip, and pulled him deeper into the service corridors. We need to move. If Varro catches us together, he'll kill us both. Then we run together. They navigated through maintenance passages and utility shafts, Mira's security clearance opening doors that would have stopped anyone else. Sethrun moved beside her with predatory grace, his new form allowing speed the chains had denied. She tried not to think about how naturally they synchronized, how her body responded to his proximity despite the betrayal still burning in her chest. They reached the lower research levels through a cargo elevator that descended into sections of the facility she'd never accessed. The doors opened onto a corridor lined with reinforced cells, and the smell hit her first. Antiseptic mixed with biological distress, the scent of captivity and fear. Behind the transparent barriers, Korvathi in both primal and humanoid forms watched their approach with eyes that held too much awareness, too much understanding, too much hope that Mira couldn't bear to see. "Oh God," she breathed. "Hassan was right. You're all people." Sethrun's hand found hers, scaled fingers intertwining with her human ones. "Help me free them." Mira's security override worked on 3 cells before the system locked her out, alarms screaming through the lower levels as Varro's protocols kicked in. She slammed her fist against the control panel, frustration boiling over, but Sethrun moved past her with purpose. He placed both hands against the reinforced barrier of the nearest cell, and his scales rippled with color, deep green shifting to amber, then brilliant gold. The Korvathi inside responded, their own scales flashing in patterns Mira recognized as communication. Language through biology. A conversation happening at frequencies she couldn't hear, conveying information she couldn't parse. "What are you telling them?" she asked. "That freedom comes with a choice. They can flee to the wilderness and hide as we've always done, or they can stand with us and end this." The imprisoned Korvathi shifted to humanoid forms, one after another, and Mira watched the transformation ripple through the cells like a wave. 15 beings who'd been treated as animals, revealing the truth Varro had worked so hard to suppress. Heavy boots echoed from the corridor behind them. Sethrun turned, positioning himself between Mira and the approaching soldiers, but she stepped around him and raised her voice to carry. "Dr. Hassan Okoye, access code Kendall 77 Alpha, emergency ethics override." A moment of silence, then Hassan's voice came through the facility's comm system, shaking but determined. "Override accepted, containment doors releasing." The cells opened in sequence, and the Korvathi emerged into the corridor with expressions ranging from confusion to fierce determination. Sethrun spoke to them in their own language, clicking, resonant sounds that made Mira's chest vibrate, and they responded by forming a protective circle around her. "They're guarding me?" she asked. "They're honoring the human who chose to see them." His amber eyes held hers. "You gave them something we thought your species incapable of. Respect." Lieutenant Ana Reyes appeared at the corridor entrance with her rifle lowered, flanked by 2 other soldiers who looked equally uncertain. Her tired brown eyes took in the scene, Korvathi in humanoid form, Mira standing among them unharmed, Sethrun at her side, and some decision crystallized in her expression. "Dr. Kendall, Colonel Varro has ordered your immediate arrest and the termination of all specimens." She paused, then added quietly, "But I'm not following that order." "Lieutenant, your career is worth less than my conscience." Reyes gestured to her companions. "We're not the only ones questioning what's happening here. Half the security force is refusing to fire on sentient beings, the other half is mobilizing for a fight. Sethran's head lifted suddenly, his scales flashing urgent red. He spoke rapidly in his own language, and the gathered Korvathi responded with similar alarm. When he turned to Mira, his expression carried weight she didn't want to acknowledge. "My people are coming, a rescue force. They'll be here within the hour, and they won't distinguish between complicit humans and innocent ones. They're going to destroy this facility and everyone in it." "Can you stop them?" "I can try, but they'll demand I return with them, and if I refuse—" He didn't finish, but she understood. Exile, maybe death, certainly the end of everything he'd known. Mira made the decision in seconds. "Then we evacuate everyone who'll listen. Reyes, how many personnel can you move?" "Maybe 100. The rest are either loyal to Varro or already fleeing on their own." "Get them out. Use the maintenance tunnels to reach the emergency transports beyond the perimeter." She pulled up the facility schematic on her slate and transmitted it to Reyes. "You have 40 minutes. As Reyes and her soldiers moved to coordinate evacuation, Mira turned to Sethran. "Take your people through the tunnels. Get them to safety. I'll handle Varro. Alone, he'll kill you. He'll try." She checked her weapon, hands steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "But I need evidence of what happened here transmitted off-world before your people destroy everything. Someone has to hold him accountable." Sethran caught her wrist, his grip gentle but insistent. "You're asking me to leave you." "I'm asking you to save your people. Isn't that what you came here to do?" His jaw tightened, scales shifting through colors she was beginning to read. Frustration, fear, something deeper that made her chest ache. Then he released her and spoke to the gathered Korvathi in their language. Several resisted, scales flashing disagreement, but he repeated himself with clear authority. They moved reluctantly toward the tunnels, and he turned back to her. "I'm not leaving without you." "My people survived 15 years by hiding. They'll survive longer by standing, but I won't survive losing you." He touched her face, clawed fingers achingly tender. "Not after I finally found someone who sees me." The moment stretched between them, heavy with everything unsaid, and Mira realized she was out of arguments. Maybe she didn't want to convince him. Maybe having him at her side felt like the only right thing in a situation built entirely from wrong choices. "Then we finish this together." They found Varro in the command center, surrounded by monitors showing the facility's collapse into chaos. Hassan was there too, his hands bound, blood trickling from a cut above his eye. The colonel looked up as they entered, his expression shifting from rage to cold calculation. Dr. Kendall, and the specimen now conveniently bipedal, his hand moved to his sidearm. "I should have terminated you both when I had the chance." "You should have recognized sentience when it was documented in front of you," Mira countered. "Hassan's research proved the Korvathi are people. You ignored it because exploitation was more profitable than diplomacy." "Exploitation?" Varro's laugh carried no humor. "I'm protecting humanity from a species that's been infiltrating our settlements for over a decade. How many of them walk among us, Doctor? How many wear human faces while plotting our extinction?" "We don't wear your faces," Sethran said, his resonant voice cutting through the tension. "We have our own, but you never bothered to ask who we were before you started taking our children." Varro raised his weapon, but Reyes appeared in the doorway behind him, her rifle trained on the colonel's back. "Sir, I'm relieving you of command under ethics protocols. You've violated 17 articles of the Interspecies Contact Accords." "Lieutenant, you're committing treason." "I'm preventing genocide." Her voice stayed steady. "Put down the weapon, sir." For a long moment, the room held its breath. Then Varro lowered his sidearm, and Reyes moved forward to secure him while other soldiers freed Hassan. The older scientist looked at Mira with pride and exhaustion in equal measure. "I transmitted everything to civilian oversight 3 minutes ago. The entire research program, the illegal captures, all of it. They're sending investigators." "Will they arrive before the Korvathi attack force?" Mira asked. Sethran had moved to the window, his scales flashing urgent patterns. "They're here." Outside, massive shapes descended from Tharos 7's twilight sky. Korvathi in their primal forms, dozens of them, moving with coordinated precision. But at their head flew a single figure in humanoid configuration, green scales marked with gold, white hair streaming behind her. Thessa, Sethran breathed. The Korvathi elder landed on the facility's outer platform, and Sethran moved to meet her with Mira at his side. The confrontation happened in both languages, his people's clicking resonance and human standard, so that everyone present could understand. "You were ordered to observe, not engage," Tessa said, her voice carrying centuries of authority, "yet you've bonded with a human and endangered our entire people." "I've shown them we exist," Sethran replied, "that we're worthy of respect, not extermination. Mira helped free our people from this place. She risked everything because it was right." Tessa's amber eyes fixed on Mira with unreadable intensity. One compassionate human doesn't erase generations of cruelty. "No," Mira agreed, "but it's a beginning. Judge me by my actions, not my species. I'm asking for the chance to build something better between our peoples." The elder studied her for a long moment, then looked at Sethran. "You would choose exile for this human?" "I would choose possibility over fear." His hand found Mira's, their fingers intertwining naturally. "Our survival meant hiding, but maybe thriving means being seen." Tessa's scales shifted through complex patterns, and the gathered Korvathi responded with their own displays, conversation, debate, democracy happening in light and color. Finally, she nodded once. "We will not destroy this facility, but we will ensure humanity knows we exist and that we demand recognition." Her gaze returned to Sethran. "You've bought your human time. Use it wisely." In the days that followed, as investigators arrived and diplomatic channels opened for the first time between humans and Korvathi, Mira found Sethran watching Theros 7's twin moons from the facility's observation deck. She approached quietly, letting her presence announce itself through proximity rather than words. "Your people are leaving tomorrow," she said. "Most of them. Some are staying to serve as ambassadors, Thessa included." He glanced at her. "I could go with them." "You could. Or I could stay here, with you, help build the bridges between our species." Mira moved closer, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his scaled skin. "That would require trust, real trust, built on truth instead of survival." "Then let's build it." He turned to face her fully, and the vulnerability in his expression stole her breath. "I can't promise I'll always understand you. Our peoples are too different. But I promise I'll never stop trying to see you as you see me completely." She reached up to touch his face, tracing the sharp lines of his reptilian features with fingers that no longer trembled. "I don't need you to be human, Sethran. I just need you to be honest." "Then honestly?" His arms encircled her, careful of his strength, and his voice dropped to resonant intimacy. "I don't have a word for what I feel when you're near, in my language or yours, but if you're willing to help me find one." She silenced him with a kiss that tasted like ozone and possibility, like the space between species collapsing into connection. His mouth was different, scaled lips, sharper teeth, but the emotion behind it transcended biology. When they finally separated, both breathing hard, the twin moons painted them in silver light. "We'll find the words together," she promised. And beneath alien stars, two species began learning to speak the same language.